It's music theory. Online, let's learn some theory. Online, by watching modules. Online, with music theory. Online.
Hi, and welcome to Module 4. Today we're going to continue talking about compound time. I just want to ensure that you totally understand compound time because it's so important to have it very clear in your mind. Remember, in compound time our main beat is always a dotted note and our pulse is the top number of the time signature. In 6/8 time, we would have 6 eighth note pulses in each measure and 2 dotted quarter note unit beats. It's extremely important how you group your notes in compound time. The notes are always grouped according to the main beat, which is the dotted note. It doesn't matter about the individual note values. We must be very careful how we group rests in compound time. We need to complete each beat, which is a group of 3 pulses. Some of the rules that we learned in previous levels will help us here. Pulses 1 and 2 may be joined together, but remember pulses 2 and 3 can never be joined together. That's because the second and third pulses, and in simple time the second and third beats, can never be joined together because that would be a weak beat connecting to a strong beat. In compound time, it's the same rule. What we're doing is we're never joining the second and third beats together or the second and third pulses. You can combine pulses 1, 2, and 3 into one dotted rest. You can only use a dotted rest when it represents a full beat. A dotted rest can only be used in compound time. Let's look at this example and see how the rests group together. The time signature here would be 6/8 time, or duple compound time. Duple compound time always has a 6 on the top of the time signature, and we would have 2 beats and 6 pulses in each measure. In duple time we must use separate dotted rests for each unit beat. Notice how the measures can be divided in half because we have 2 beats in each measure. We have 6 pulses and 2 beats. Let's look at our first measure. We have an eighth note at the beginning and an eighth note at the end. A common theory question would be to complete the rest of the measure with rests. Let's start at the beginning and complete our first beat. In order to complete our first beat, we'll need 2 more pulses to make our 3 pulses. Remember the rule that the second pulse can never be joined to the third pulse? That means we need to use 2 eighth rests in order to obey that rule. In the second part of our measure, we can use a quarter rest because the rule is that we can combine the first and the second pulses together. The next measure is the same, so we will not need to go over that one. Let's look at the last measure together. It's starting with a 16th note, so we will need to complete that first pulse by adding a 16th rest. That gives us our first pulse. Now we need to complete pulses 2 and 3. Because we cannot join the second and third pulses together, we'll need to use 2 eighth rests. Now we'll complete the rest of the measure, beginning with the last 16th note. Let's complete that third pulse by adding a 16th rest. Remember, we can join the first and second pulses together, which means that we can use a quarter rest here. Always remember that a whole measure rest is a whole measure rest. So that's why there's a whole measure rest here for the last measure. Compound triple time has a 9 as the upper number in the time signature. Do you remember that simple triple time has a number 3 as the top number of the time signature? I just thought I'd mention that. Well, triple time, that means we have 3 beats of dotted notes and 9 pulses. When you look at this example, you can see the 3 beats and 9 pulses. The rule for triple time is that you can use a dotted rest for each beat, the same as you could in compound duple time. Remember, though, that you cannot join any of the unit beats together. The rule for the pulses is the same in all compound time signatures. Just like we saw in compound simple time, you can join the first and second pulses together, but you can never join the second and third pulses together. Compound quadruple time always has a 12 in the time signature. That means that we have 4 beats and 12 pulses in each measure. In simple quadruple time, we also had 4 beats. Do you remember in simple quadruple time, you can use a rest for the first half of the beat or a rest for the second half of the beat. However, you can never join the second and third beats together. In compound quadruple time, you can join beats 1 and 2 together, or you can join beats 3 and 4 together, but you can never join the second and the third beats together. What you're doing when you join beats 1 and 2 together, or beats 3 and 4 together, is that you're completing half of the measure with rests. This is the only time when you can combine any of your beats. Let's look at these examples, just so I can clarify the divisions. Our first example in 12/4, we can see how we have our first beat, second beat, third beat, and fourth beat. If we draw a line in the middle of this measure, you can see that in 12/4 time, we can divide the measure equally in half. That means that if we had to use rests for beats 1 and 2, we'd be using a dotted whole rest. And we could do the same thing with measures 3 and 4. The next measure is in 12/8 time. In this case, our unit beat is a dotted quarter note. Again, we can divide this measure in half and have beats 1 and 2 together and beats 3 and 4 together. If you're using a rest for beats 1 and 2, you'd be using a dotted half rest. If you were using one for beats 3 and 4, it would also be a dotted half rest. Remember, though, you can never join the second and third beats together. The next example is in 12/16. Here we can join the first and the second beats together. To do that, you would use a dotted quarter rest. These third and fourth beats can be joined together, and that would also be a dotted quarter rest. In 12/32, you'd be using a dotted eighth rest for the first part of the measure and a dotted eighth rest for the second part of the measure. Remember, you can never join the second and third beats together. Always remember that a whole rest is always a whole rest for a whole measure. Any of the time signatures that use a whole rest will be for a whole measure. In this example, you see it's in 6/8 time, but the last measure is using a whole rest. I really hope compound time is getting less and less confusing for you. If you have any questions about compound time, by doing your homework assignments, it should make it clearer. If it's still not clear, bring your questions to Theory Club or contact me. Remember, we're in this together, and I'm here to help you every step of the way. I hope you have a super duper week. Bye now.
It's music theory. Online, let's learn some theory. Online, by watching modules. Online, with music theory. Online.